All right, guys. Hope y'all are doing well at home. We're gonna do a crash course, run through some of the harder concepts on the study guide, and then there's a Kahoot y'all guys can do until midnight tonight. Okay, so that does go away. All right. So first off, we get the anatomy of the heart. This is something you should have already done. You should already have in your notebook. The only hard thing to remember here is that your left is its right. So this is my left side, so I know this is the right atrium, right ventricles, just because it's my left side. Another thing, you do need to know the blood flow. So some questions will be like, blood was in this chamber. What does it go to next? You need to understand how the blood flows through the heart. So let's take a look at that real quick. Blood comes from the upper body. It's deoxygenated. Comes from the lower body. It all kind of fills into I believe this question, it's question 12. Okay, so blood fills into the right atrium, pumps down through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle, up and out the pulmonary valve, and then it goes to the lungs. So the lungs are sitting on both sides of your heart. You should already know that. It gets oxygenated. So if any question on the test is, what is the blood on the right side of the heart? We know it's deoxygenated because it's already been through all those capillary beds, all those hundreds of thousands of miles of capillaries and blood vessels. So there's no oxygen left. So it goes to the lungs and it gets oxygenated. So it comes back to the left. All that blood flows back. It looks like these blood vessels flow into the right atrium, but they don't. They flow behind everything into the left atrium. Left atrium pumps down through the bicuspid valve to the left ventricle, biggest, most muscular chamber of the heart, and it pumps up and out the aorta, where it goes to your arms, head, and this one will come back down into your lower body. This one would basically, don't do this, but it would come down this way. So that was the descending aorta right there. So yeah, there's this extra little blood vessel right here. That's descending aorta. That's not something, it's not an anatomical term you need to know anyways. All right, this diagram doesn't have a line for interventricular septum. So this thing right here is the interventricular septum. And then it doesn't have a line for pulmonary valve. So it's this valve right here. It basically keeps blood from flowing back from the lungs into the heart. All right, which ventricle is thickest? It's the left one. Why? Because if you look at it, the right one only has to pump to the lungs. The left one has to pump to the entire body, besides the lungs. Mitral valve is also bicuspid. We've already talked about number 7. SA node and AV node, okay? So if you didn't do the electricity of the heart assignment, you need to do that because the EKG will be on here as well. So the SA node is a little mini brain that sets up right up here. And it pulses about once per second. And when it sends electricity, the whole heart will depolarize. Because remember, these cells are connected better than your skeletal muscle cells are. So if one cell depolarizes, the whole heart will depolarize. So the SA node is simply your pacemaker. About once a second, it sends out a pulse for your heart to beat. If you need more blood pressure, it will speed up. Your brain and hormones can act on this to get it to speed up or slow down, but it will go by itself. So if this was completely cut off from the rest of the body, it would still pump. The AV node is extremely important. So it's right about here. And the AV node slows it down. We want the ventricle, because the atria's job is to fill the ventricles. So we want them to completely fill the ventricles before the ventricles start to contract. Because if the ventricles start to contract while these are still contracting, the ventricles are stronger, so blood is going to go back the wrong way in these valves. So we want a little bit of delay. So the SA node starts the signal, the AV node delays it, so the atrias can finish filling the ventricles. All right, 2 places you would find valves, obviously the heart. And then if you remember the assignment on varicose veins, you have valves in your arms and legs. More in your legs. It's because veins have such low blood pressure. The valves keep it from kind of pulling in your feet, if you're healthy. All right, systolic pressure, diastolic pressure. So if you look at the video I did on blood pressure, there were 2 numbers, and I didn't do a good job explaining systolic and diastolic. But the top number is systolic. So I think the guy he was like 130 millimeters of mercury. And his bottom number was 70 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so what does that mean? That means this is the pressure in his arm. Remember, blood pressure is always in usually the right arm. So in his right arm, when his ventricles were contracting, so what is occurring in the heart? The ventricles, the big chambers of the heart, are contracting. That gives us up to 130 millimeters of mercury pressure. And then what is diastolic pressure? Well, that's the lowest pressure that is found in the arm. So the pressure in his arm never dropped below 70. Never got above 130, never got below 70 while he was resting anyways. So what is occurring in the heart during diastolic? Well, the ventricles are relaxing. All right. Hypertension, you should be able to look those up, no problem. Healthy blood pressure, you can look that up. Factors that affect blood pressure, that's going to be like if you're on medications, if you have poor cardiovascular fitness, if you're exercising, or just simply bad genetics. There's a lot of things involved in that. 2 pulse points, that's radial here, and then the carotid on the neck. What is pulse? Pulse is simply heart rate, so beats per minute. Vasoconstriction, vasodilation. This is not something we covered a lot, but it's pretty easy. Basically, the idea is that your blood vessels can constrict, and they can vasodilate, they can open up. Your arteries can do that more than your veins can. So when would we want to vasoconstrict? Well, let's say you're laying on the couch and you stand up. If you stand up really fast, there's not enough blood pressure getting to your brain, so you could potentially pass out or just feel kind of dizzy. So we want to increase the heart rate, but we also want to vasoconstrict. If we vasoconstrict, make smaller those arteries, they will actually increase your blood pressure. When we want to decrease blood pressure, well, if you're exercising, your heart's pumping, you got a lot of cardio output, so we want to vasodilate to decrease blood pressure and increase blood flow. Okay, so when we open those arteries up, if the heart's pumping faster, we actually, not only will we keep our blood pressure to a safe level, but it'll increase the amount of flow getting to your muscles. What causes the lub-dub sound of the heart? I posted a video on this, but it's basically those valves in your heart. So when the valves are closing, water's rushing through, so it's like shh. And then if you're healthy, the valves will completely close and the sound will stop. If your valves don't close, you have kind of heart murmur where it's shh, where the turbulence stays. But what causes the lub-dub sound? The tricuspid and bicuspid, that's the first sound. As the blood's rushing through there, it closes. Shh. It's the lub sound. The dub sound is the aortic and the pulmonary valves closing. What question was that? Yeah, what causes the lub-dub sound? So it's the turbulence as the blood is rushing through closing valves, okay? It's not the valves actually like slamming shut. All right, what stimulates the SA node? Itself. Draw P, QRS, T wave. Explain what's happening each step. Okay, let's do that. So we got P, QRS, T wave. Okay, so here's P, QRS, T wave. Okay, now these things you do need to know. This is going to be on the test. It says, what's happening in each step? What chambers are contracting, relaxing, SA node, AV node? Well, the very first thing that happens in the heart is the SA node fires. So we know that the SA node firing happens right here at the very start. And we know that the AV node pauses the signal and starts ventricle depolarization. So we know the AV node is right here. Now, how do I know that? Well, the SA node's easy because it's the start of the whole thing. And how do I know the AV node goes here? Well, the QRS wave shows us ventricle depolarization. And the only thing you really need to remember is that depolarization leads to contraction. And repolarization leads to relaxation. It's not instantaneous, but it does happen. So the very first chambers of the heart to beat are the atria. So it makes sense that this is atrial dipole. And then the very last bump, this is the ventricles relaxing. So this is ventricle repole, which means it will start to relax. And then where do the atrias repolarize at? Well, they happen right here in the QRS wave. So this is also atrial repole. Remember, there was you should have whole notes on all this stuff. None of this should be new. Repolarization leads to contraction, relaxation. We already said it. Leads to relaxation. Purkinje fibers, bundle of His, SA node, AV node, they're all part of the electrical system of the heart, sometimes called the intrinsic conduction system of the heart. Should be good on these. Why is the interventricular septum important? These chambers don't have the same amount of muscle, so if there was a hole in here, if this was gone, blood would be flowing the wrong way in the heart. It would go left to right. Some people do have that abnormality, but we want to keep those chambers separated. What is a heart murmur? It's just an abnormal sound in the heart because of abnormal turbulence. What can cause a heart murmur? It's a good one. Can be a hole in the heart, leaky valve. It's usually a leaky valve because you got to imagine if the valve's not closing all the way, instead of that really nice quick sound, it'll be like won't ever fully completely close, so there'll be turbulence going through it for a long time. All right, last page. How do artery walls compare to vein walls? Artery walls have a lot more muscle. They have ability to contract more to help increase blood pressure. Veins, we really don't want them to contract too much because the blood's just coming out of those capillary beds, and we don't want a whole lot of back pressure on that. What is a heart stent? You should have saw the video on that. Basically, there's a blockage in the heart. We go in there and put a little metal grate in there and open that up on one of the coronary arteries. What is a coronary bypass? We're just bypassing the clot. So instead of trying to open up the clot, we just simply bypass it altogether. What heart artery would be most detrimental if it was clogged? Widowmaker, hint not aorta. This is the left anterior or anterior descending branch of left coronary artery. A lot of times it's just called the left coronary artery. So if the left coronary artery was clogged, you have a heart attack in the left ventricle, meaning it's not getting oxygen. So that's one of the most fatal things. Atherosclerosis is simply plaque buildup. Okay, so we always talk about plaque buildup with cholesterol. Well, here, what is atherosclerosis? That is the disease when you get like so much plaque buildup that you're actually starting to have problems. We would say you have atherosclerosis. It also makes your arteries harder, which can be potentially deadly, as clots can be easier to bust off due to mechanical damage. All right, 36. How does high bad cholesterol relate to atherosclerosis? How does high blood pressure relate? High bad cholesterol and high blood pressure relate to atherosclerosis. So I'm going to take you up to the board and show you what I walk through the in-person students. It's kind of like this. The camera's right there. So all three of these things relate to each other. So you have high bad cholesterol, you have high blood pressure, and you have atherosclerosis, and they were all related. So it doesn't matter really you start. Most people, the doctor will be like, hey, you have high bad cholesterol and you have high blood pressure. So why does that scare the doctor? Well, you have high blood pressure, we know that you are damaging your arteries. If you have high bad cholesterol, we know that plaque is depositing at those damaged sites. And if we have both of these things in conjunction with each other, we know you have plaque buildup and you are developing, if not already have, severe atherosclerosis. Once again, this is the #1 killer in the United States. So these two things are really easy to check: bad cholesterol, blood pressure. So your doctor is really concerned about those two things. Now, how does this relate back to itself? Well, plaque buildup means the arteries are less flexible, which means you'll have higher blood pressure. Your systolic pressure will be higher, and therefore you'll have high blood pressure. You'll create more damaged sites, more plaque buildup, and then you have this basically circle of you not living very long. Okay, so that's how those things relate, and good luck on the test, guys. See you Tuesday morning for a Zoom. If you're watching this later, it won't be there.